My wife chose my brother over me. 10 years later, they came begging for my help. The first time my mother called me after 10 years of silence, I almost didn't recognize her voice. It was thinner than I remembered. Like someone had taken the woman who used to command every room she entered and folded her into something fragile. Daniel, she whispered. I stared at the unknown number on my phone for a long moment before answering. I was sitting in my office on the 22nd floor of a glass building downtown, looking out over a city I had built my second life in. On my desk sat a framed picture of my daughter, Lily, smiling with 2 missing front teeth. Beside it was a coffee mug that read, "Best Dad Ever." 10 years earlier, I had owned nothing except a broken heart, a suitcase, and the kind of silence that follows you when everyone you love decides you are the problem. "Who is this?" I asked, even though part of me already knew. There was a pause. "It's your mother." I didn't answer. For 10 years, that word had meant nothing but pain. Mother, family, home. All of those words had become empty houses in my mind, places I refused to visit. "Daniel, please don't hang up." I leaned back in my chair and looked at the city skyline. "Why are you calling me?" She started crying. Not the dramatic crying she used to do when she wanted sympathy. This was different. It was quiet and ashamed. The kind of crying people do when pride has finally run out of places to hide. "It's your brother," she said. "It's Michael. We need your help." I almost laughed. Michael. My younger brother. The golden child. The boy my parents protected from every consequence. The man who slept with my wife while I was working 60-hour weeks trying to build a future for her. The man my family chose over me. My wife chose him too. And now, 10 years later, they needed me. I closed my eyes and let the silence stretch between us. Then I asked the only question that mattered. Where was all this desperation when I was the one begging you to believe me? My mother inhaled sharply. "Daniel." "No," I said calmly. "You wanted me gone. You got what you wanted." I hung up. For a few seconds, I just sat there, staring at the phone in my hand. I thought I would feel satisfied. I thought I would feel powerful. But I didn't. I felt the old wound open again. Not as violently as before, but enough to remind me that some betrayals don't disappear with time. They just learn to sleep quietly under the surface. And when someone says the right name, they wake up. My name is Daniel Carter. 10 years ago, I had a wife named Emily, a brother named Michael, and a family I would have died for. By the end of that year, I had none of them. I met Emily when I was 26. She was working at a small marketing firm near the accounting office where I had just landed my first serious job. I remember the first time I saw her because she was standing in the rain outside the building, holding a broken umbrella and laughing at herself like the weather had personally challenged her and lost. She had bright brown eyes, a quick smile, and a way of making people feel like they were the only person in the room. When she talked, she looked directly at you. When she laughed, she touched your arm. When she listened, she made you believe every word mattered. I was quiet back then, not shy exactly, but careful. I grew up in a house where being loud meant you were competing with Michael, and nobody won that competition except Michael. My brother was 2 years younger than me, but he had always taken up more space. When we were kids, if Michael broke something, my parents said he was curious. If I broke something, I was careless. If Michael failed a test, he was stressed. If I got a B instead of an A, I wasn't trying hard enough. If Michael lied, he was scared. If I told the truth, I was being difficult. My father used to say, "Your brother needs more help than you do, Daniel. You're the strong one." I didn't understand then that being called strong can become a cage. Strong people don't get comfort. Strong people don't get protected. Strong people are expected to absorb the damage and keep standing. So I became exactly what they needed me to be. Responsible, quiet, reliable. Michael became charming, reckless, and forgiven. When I brought Emily home for the first time, I was nervous in a way I hadn't been in years. I wanted my family to love her. I wanted her to feel like she was joining something warm, something stable. My mother hugged her like they had known each other forever. My father complimented her smile. Michael gave her that easy grin he gave every woman. "Well," he said, shaking her hand a little too long, "Daniel definitely outkicked his coverage." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. Back then, I didn't know that was the first warning. Emily and I got married 2 years later. It wasn't a huge wedding, but it was beautiful. White flowers, soft lights, my mother crying in the front row, my father clapping me on the back like he was proud of me for once. Michael stood beside me as my best man. During his toast he said, "Daniel has always been the steady one. The dependable one. The guy who does the right thing even when nobody notices. Emily, you're lucky. My brother will never let you down." People applauded. Emily looked at me with tears in her eyes. I believed him. That was the worst part. For the first few years, our marriage was good. Not perfect, but good. We rented a small house, adopted a dog named Charlie, and spent Sunday mornings making pancakes in old sweatpants. Emily wanted to start her own design agency someday. I wanted to buy a home and maybe have kids once we were financially stable. I worked hard because I thought I was building something for us. Long hours, weekend projects, extra certifications, promotions that came slowly but steadily. Emily used to say she admired my ambition. Then, somewhere around year 4, admiration turned into resentment. "You're always tired," she said one night while I was reviewing spreadsheets at the kitchen table. "I know," I said. "This project ends next month. You said that last month. I'm doing this for us." She crossed her arms. "Sometimes it feels like you're doing it to avoid me." That hurt, but I didn't say so. I just closed my laptop and apologized. I started coming home earlier when I could. I planned date nights. I surprised her with flowers. I listened when she talked about feeling lonely, but nothing seemed to reach her. At the same time, Michael started coming around more often. At first I was glad. He had gone through another breakup, lost another job, and was staying with our parents again. I thought maybe spending time with us would help him get back on his feet. Emily liked having him around. Too much, I would later realize. He made her laugh. He complimented her cooking. He listened to her frustrations about me with a sympathetic tilt of his head. "Daniel's always been intense," he'd say. "Even when we were kids. He means well, but he doesn't really know how to relax." I heard him say that once from the hallway. I should have stepped in. I should have told him not to discuss my marriage with my wife behind my back, but I didn't, because I was the strong one. Because I didn't want to seem jealous. Because I trusted them. Trust is strange. You don't notice it when it's holding. You only notice it when it breaks. The first real sign came on a Friday night. I was supposed to attend a work dinner, but it got canceled at the last minute. I decided not to tell Emily. I thought I would surprise her with takeout from her favorite Thai place. When I pulled into the driveway, Michael's car was there. That wasn't unusual. Not anymore. But the house was dark except for the living room lamp. I opened the front door quietly, balancing the food in one hand. Then I heard Emily laugh. It was soft, intimate. Not the laugh she gave at family dinners. Not the laugh she gave at TV shows. It was the laugh she used to give me when we were first dating. I stopped in the hallway. Michael's voice followed. "You deserve better than feeling invisible." Emily sighed. "Daniel isn't a bad man." "I know," Michael said. "But maybe that's not enough." There was silence. Then Emily said something I still hear sometimes when the night is too quiet. "With you, I feel seen." The bag of food crinkled in my hand. I stepped into the living room. They sprang apart like teenagers caught stealing liquor. Emily was on the couch, Michael beside her, his arms stretched along the back cushion behind her shoulders. "Daniel," she said too quickly. "You're home early." I looked at Michael. He smiled, but his face had lost color. "Dinner got canceled," I said. Nobody moved. I should have demanded answers. I should have shouted. Instead, I placed the food on the coffee table and said, "I'm going to take a shower." That was who I was then. A man who had been trained to make everyone else comfortable, even while his own world was cracking. The affair came out 3 weeks later. Not because either of them confessed. Because Michael's ex-girlfriend, Rachel, called me. I barely knew her, but her voice shook with anger. "Daniel, I'm sorry," she said. "I thought you deserved to know." She told me she had seen Michael and Emily together at a hotel bar 2 towns over. Not once. 3 times. She had pictures. Messages too. Michael had apparently bragged to a friend that Emily was basically leaving Daniel anyway. When she sent the screenshots, I sat on the edge of our bed and read them until my hands went numb. Emily telling Michael she missed him. Michael telling Emily that Daniel would never understand her. Emily saying, "I wish I had chosen you first." That sentence destroyed something in me. I wish I had chosen you first. I didn't confront her immediately. I waited until she came home that evening. I had printed the messages and placed them on the dining table. When she walked in, she froze. "Daniel, how long?" I asked. Her eyes filled with tears instantly, but I didn't trust them anymore. "How long?" I repeated. She sat down slowly. "It just happened." "That's not an answer." "6 months, she whispered. 6 months. For 6 months, I had kissed her goodbye in the morning while she was betraying me with my brother. For 6 months, I had sat at dinners with my family while Michael looked me in the eye and called me bro. For 6 months, my marriage had been a joke everyone understood except me. "Did you love him?" I asked. She covered her face. "I don't know." That was answer enough. I stood up. She reached for me. "Daniel, please. I was lonely. You were always working. Michael was there and—" "Don't," I said. She flinched. "Don't make this my fault." "I'm not. You are." She cried harder. "I made a mistake." "No," I said. "A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. A mistake is taking the wrong exit. 6 months with my brother is a choice." She had no response. I packed a bag that night and drove to a motel. The next morning, my mother called. I thought she was calling to comfort me. I was wrong. "Daniel, we need to talk calmly," she said. I sat up in the motel bed, exhausted and hollow. "You know, Emily called us. Of course she did. She's very upset. I laughed once. She's upset? Don't be cruel. This is hard for everyone. Something cold settled in my chest. Hard for everyone. I repeated. My mother sighed. Your brother made a terrible mistake. My brother had an affair with my wife. Yes, and he's ashamed. Is he? Daniel, please. We can fix this as a family. I stared at the stained motel carpet. What does that mean? It means we don't destroy each other. Emily is confused. Michael is fragile. Your father and I think the best thing is for everyone to take some time before making any permanent decisions. I understood then. They weren't calling to stand with me. They were calling to manage me. What about me? I asked. There was a pause. You're strong, she said gently. You'll get through this. There it was. The sentence that had followed me my whole life. You're strong. Translation. You can take the pain, so we don't have to protect you. I hung up without saying goodbye. Over the next week, everything got worse. My father called me ungrateful for refusing to come to a family meeting. My mother said I was punishing everyone. Michael sent one text that said, I never meant to hurt you. I didn't reply. Emily sent dozens of messages. Some apologetic. Some defensive. Some cruel. You were never emotionally available. I didn't plan this. Michael understands me in ways you never tried to. Then, finally, I think I'm in love with him. That was the one that ended my marriage in my heart before the lawyers ever got involved. The family meeting happened without me. Later, my cousin Sarah called and told me what happened. Emily sat between my parents and cried. Michael cried too. My mother held his hand. My father said the situation was tragic, but that Daniel needed to stop acting like the only victim. According to Sarah, my father said, if Daniel really loved Emily, he would want her to be happy. With my brother. My father said that. When Sarah told me, I didn't speak for a full minute. Then I thanked her, and blocked every member of my immediate family. The divorce was ugly. Emily didn't want the house because we were renting. She didn't want Charlie because Michael was allergic to dogs. That detail broke me in a way I wasn't ready for. She could betray me, abandon our marriage, choose my brother, and still somehow it was the dog she discarded without hesitation that made me understand who she had become. I kept Charlie. For 3 months, he was the only living thing that seemed happy I came home. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. I slept on a mattress on the floor. I ate frozen dinners. I worked until midnight because stopping meant thinking. Then one evening, I came home and found Charlie lying by the door, tail wagging weakly. He was old already. Older than I wanted to admit. The vet said it was cancer. I lost him 6 weeks later. I remember sitting in my empty apartment afterward, holding his collar, and realizing there was nobody left to call. That was the lowest point of my life. Not the affair. Not the divorce. Not my family choosing Michael. It was that night. The silence. The knowledge that, if I disappeared, the people who should have loved me most, would probably feel relieved. Something changed after that. Not all at once. There was no movie moment where I stood in the rain and decided to become a new man. It was smaller than that. I got up the next morning. That was all. Then I got up the morning after that. And the morning after that, I started running because I couldn't sleep. Then I joined a gym. Then I stopped drinking. I took on a consulting project outside my regular job. It paid badly at first, but I discovered I was good at solving problems for struggling businesses. Numbers made sense to me. Systems made sense. People often didn't. A restaurant owner I helped referred me to a friend. That friend referred me to a manufacturer. Within a year, I had enough clients to quit my job and start my own business advisory firm. The first 3 years were brutal. I worked from coffee shops. I took calls from my car. I wore the same 2 suits until the elbows wore thin. But I had one advantage. I knew what it felt like to lose everything. That made me fearless in a way I hadn't been before. When you have already been abandoned, rejection loses its teeth. By year 5, my firm had grown. By year 7, we had offices in 3 cities. By year 9, we specialized in rescuing family-owned companies from collapse. That irony was not lost on me. I helped fathers and sons stop fighting long enough to save businesses. I helped siblings divide responsibilities before resentment poisoned the company. I helped people have the conversations my own family had refused to have. And somewhere along the way, I became wealthy. Not billionaire wealthy, not private island wealthy, but wealthy enough to never check my bank account before buying groceries. Wealthy enough to pay off my apartment, then buy a house. Wealthy enough to stop feeling like survival was one bad month away. I also met Anna. She was an attorney who represented one of my clients. Sharp, calm, and completely uninterested in my attempts to keep emotional distance. On our 3rd date, I told her I was divorced. On our 5th, I told her why. She didn't interrupt. She didn't pity me. She just listened. When I finished, she said, "You know being strong doesn't mean you deserve to be hurt, right?" I had to look away. Nobody had ever said that to me before. We married 2 years later. When our daughter Lily was born, I promised myself I would never make her earn love by being easy to ignore. My life became peaceful. Not perfect, peaceful. Then my mother called. After I hung up, I told myself that was the end of it. It wasn't. 3 days later, Sarah called. Unlike the others, I had never cut Sarah off. She had been the only one who told me the truth when everyone else tried to bury it. We weren't close, but every Christmas she sent a message, and every Christmas I replied. Daniel, she said. I know your mom called. I sighed. Did she send you to plead their case? No. I told her not to call you. That surprised me. Sarah continued. But there are things you should know. I walked to the window of my home office. Outside, Lily was riding her bike in the driveway, while Anna watched from the porch. What things? Michael's business is collapsing. I almost said, Michael has a business? Sarah answered the question before I asked. Your parents gave him Dad's old warehouse property after you left. He and Emily turned it into some kind of event rental company. Weddings. Corporate parties. That sort of thing. For a while, it worked. I stayed silent. They borrowed against the property. Then borrowed again. Michael made bad deals. Emily handled marketing, but apparently she hasn't been involved much lately. There are lawsuits. Contractors unpaid. Taxes overdue. Sounds like Michael. There's more, Sarah said carefully. Your parents co-signed some loans. I closed my eyes. Of course they did. How bad? Bad enough that they could lose their house. I felt nothing at first. Then a small, unwanted ache moved through me. The house. The house where I grew up. The house where my mother made pancakes on Saturdays. The house where my father taught me to change a tire. The house where Michael was forgiven and I was forgotten. Why do they need me? I asked. Because the bank wants a restructuring plan. A real one. Someone mentioned your firm. Your parents realized you specialize in this. I laughed quietly. That's almost poetic. Daniel, I'm not asking you to help them. I know. I just thought you should hear the truth before they twist it. Thank you. She hesitated. And Daniel? Yeah? Emily asked about you. The room seemed to still. What did she ask? If you were married. If you had kids. If you were happy. I looked out at Anna lifting Lily into the air while Lily screamed with laughter. I am, I said. Good, Sarah replied. You deserve that. After we hung up, I didn't tell Anna immediately. Not because I was hiding it, but because I needed to understand what I felt. That night, after Lily went to bed, I told her everything. Anna listened the way she always did, fully, patiently, without trying to control my response. When I finished, she asked, Do you want to help them? No. Do you want to see them suffer? I didn't answer right away. 10 years ago, the answer would have been yes. I would have wanted Michael humiliated, Emily abandoned. My parents begging on the steps of the house, they chose him over me but sitting there in my kitchen, with my daughter's drawings on the fridge and my wife across from me, revenge felt smaller than I expected. I don't know, I admitted. I don't want them in my life. But I also don't know if I want to be the reason my parents lose their home. Anna nodded slowly. You wouldn't be the reason, she said. Their choices would be. That sentence stayed with me. Their choices would be. The next morning, I received an email through my company website. Subject. Urgent request for consultation. The name attached was Emily Carter. She had kept my last name. I stared at that longer than I should have. The email was professional at first. Too professional. It explained that Carter Events LLC was facing severe financial distress and needed emergency restructuring support. Then, halfway through, the mask slipped. Daniel, I know I have no right to ask you for anything. But your parents are terrified. They may lose their home. Whatever happened between us, please don't punish them for my mistakes. My mistakes, not our betrayal, not the destruction we caused. My mistakes. At the bottom, she wrote, Michael is not handling this well. I don't know what else to do. I forwarded the email to Anna. She replied from the living room. Your call. But do not meet them alone. That was why I loved her. She didn't tell me what to do. She just reminded me not to walk into old fire without protection. I agreed to one meeting. Not at my office. Not at my home. At a neutral conference room rented by the hour. I also brought Marcus, my firm's senior restructuring analyst. He knew nothing about my personal history except that this was a sensitive case, and he was there to keep the conversation professional. When I arrived, they were already there. My parents sat on one side of the table. They looked old. That was the first thing I noticed, and I hated myself for noticing. My father's hair had gone almost completely white. My mother's hands trembled around a paper cup of water. Michael stood by the window, scrolling on his phone like a bored teenager. He had gained weight, and his expensive watch looked out of place with his wrinkled shirt. Emily sat at the end of the table. For 10 years, I had wondered what I would feel if I saw her again. Rage? Longing? Pain? What I felt was distance. She was still beautiful, but in a tired way. Like someone who had spent years trying to convince herself she had made the right choice and was now exhausted from the effort. When I entered, my mother stood. "Daniel." I gave a polite nod. "Mrs. Carter." She flinched. "Good," I thought. Then I hated that I thought it. My father cleared his throat. "Son, Mr. Carter," I said, placing my folder on the table. "This is a business consultation. Let's keep it that way." Michael scoffed. "Seriously?" I looked at him for the first time. "Seriously." He rolled his eyes. "You're really going to act like we're strangers?" I held his gaze. "Aren't we?" Emily looked down. Marcus opened his laptop, professional and unreadable. "We'll begin with financial disclosures," I said. "I reviewed the documents you sent. They're incomplete." My father shifted uncomfortably. "We brought more." He slid a folder across the table. For the next hour, we discussed numbers, debt, revenue, liens, pending lawsuits, tax penalties, vendor claims, personal guarantees. The situation was worse than Sarah had said. Michael had expanded too quickly, used deposits from future events to pay past debts, ignored payroll taxes, and taken high-interest private loans from people who did not forgive easily. Emily had apparently warned him 2 years earlier, but by then he had locked her out of most financial decisions. My parents had not just co-signed loans, they had put their house up as collateral. When Marcus asked Michael why he kept expanding despite declining cash flow, Michael shrugged. "You have to take risks in business." I said, "That's what people say when they confuse gambling with strategy." His face hardened. "Still judging me after all these years?" "No," I said. "I'm evaluating your company. And your company is a disaster." My mother began crying softly. Emily finally spoke. "Can it be saved?" I turned to Marcus. He answered. "Technically, yes. But not under current management." Michael slammed his hand on the table. "Excuse me?" Marcus didn't blink. "Your creditors have lost confidence. Your books are unreliable. There are potential legal issues with deposit handling. Any restructuring would require immediate removal of financial control from current ownership." "You mean me?" Michael snapped. "Yes," Marcus said. Michael looked at me. "This is what you wanted, right? To come in here and humiliate me?" I closed the folder. "Michael, I didn't come to you. You came to me." The room went silent. My father rubbed his forehead. "Daniel, there has to be a way to fix this without tearing the family apart." I almost smiled. "There was a time you cared a lot about keeping the family together," I said. "Funny how that only happens when Michael is about to lose something." My father's face reddened. "That's not fair." "No?" I leaned forward. "When my wife had an affair with my brother, you told people I should want her to be happy." Emily shut her eyes. My mother whispered, "Daniel, please. No. You asked me here. You don't get to decide which parts of the past are relevant." Michael stood. I knew this was a mistake. "For once," I said, "we agree." He pointed at me. "You think you're better than us because you got rich?" I stood too. "No, Michael. I think I'm better than who I was when I let all of you convince me my pain was inconvenient." That landed. Even my father looked away. The meeting ended with no agreement. I told them I would send a formal assessment within 48 hours. I also made one thing clear. My firm would not take the case unless every party agreed to full transparency, legal oversight, and Michael's removal from operational control. Michael called me a vindictive bastard on the way out. My mother apologized for his language. Not for what he had done. For his language. Some patterns don't die easily. That evening, Emily called my personal number. I didn't know how she had it. I answered only because Anna was sitting beside me and nodded once. "What do you want, Emily?" Her breath shook. "I wanted to apologize. You had 10 years. I know." Silence. Then she said, "I was wrong." I stared at the kitchen counter. "I know. I don't expect forgiveness." "That's good." She swallowed. "I need you to understand something. Back then, I told myself you didn't need me. You were always so controlled. So capable." Michael made me feel needed. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So you chose the man who needed rescuing over the man who was drowning quietly." She began to cry. "I didn't know you were drowning. You never asked." That stopped her. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "He wasn't who I thought he was." I closed my eyes. There it was. The confession beneath the apology. She wasn't sorry only because she hurt me. She was sorry because the man she chose had failed her. "That's not my problem anymore," I said. "I know." "No, Emily. I don't think you do. You don't miss me. You miss the life you thought I would give you. You miss the version of me who cleaned up messes without asking who made them." "That's not true. Isn't it?" She had no answer. I said, "Do not call this number again." Then I hung up. 2 days later, I sent the assessment. It was direct. Carter Events could avoid total collapse only if 3 things happened immediately. First, Michael had to resign as managing partner. Second, the company had to enter a supervised restructuring process, with all finances controlled by an independent trustee. Third, my parents' home could only be protected if they signed a legal agreement, separating their personal assets from any future business obligations, and acknowledged that prior guarantees had been made without independent financial advice. I also included one personal condition: I would not accept payment from them. Instead, my firm's work would be billed to the court-approved restructuring budget if the process advanced. I would not personally profit from their crisis. But before I agreed to lead the restructuring, I required a written statement from all four of them acknowledging what happened 10 years ago. Not a public statement, not a social media post, a private document. The truth, in writing. Emily's affair with Michael. My parents' decision to pressure me into silence. Their financial and emotional support of Michael after he betrayed me. Their refusal to hold him accountable. I expected them to reject it. Michael did immediately. His email was barely coherent. You're sick. You want us to grovel. You're still obsessed with Emily. No wonder she left you. My father called Marcus and tried to negotiate around the condition. Marcus told him all communication had to go through legal channels. My mother sent me a message. Daniel, making us write those things will not change the past. For the first time in years, I replied, no, but refusing to write them proves nothing has changed. The statement arrived 4 days later. Michael's signature was missing. Emily had signed. My mother had signed. My father had signed. I read the document alone in my office. It was only 2 pages, but it took me almost an hour to finish. We acknowledged that Daniel Carter was betrayed by his then wife, Emily Carter, and his brother, Michael Carter. We acknowledged that, instead of supporting Daniel, we minimized his pain and pressured him to preserve the family's reputation. We acknowledged that Daniel was treated unfairly and abandoned during one of the most painful periods of his life. We acknowledged that our choices contributed to the loss of our relationship with him. I thought reading those words would heal something. It didn't. But it did something else. It confirmed I hadn't imagined it. For years, even after rebuilding my life, a small part of me had wondered if I had been too harsh, too cold, too final. There it was in black and white. They knew. They had always known. Michael refused to sign until the bank scheduled foreclosure proceedings on my parents' house. Then suddenly, he signed. Of course he did. The restructuring began 3 weeks later. Michael fought every step. He withheld passwords. He blamed employees. He accused Emily of sabotage. He yelled at my parents for letting Daniel take over. He tried to transfer money from a business account the night before control moved to the trustee. That last part created legal consequences. For the first time in his life, my brother met a door my parents couldn't open for him. The trustee removed him from the premises. Creditors were notified. A forensic accountant reviewed the books. Some events were canceled. Others were fulfilled under supervision. Assets were sold. The warehouse property was placed on the market. My parents' house was spared, but barely. They had to downsize their lifestyle, liquidate retirement funds, and sign away any remaining claim to the business. Emily cooperated fully. I'll give her that. She provided emails, contracts, passwords, client lists. She admitted she had ignored red flags because facing them would mean admitting her life with Michael was built on a lie. One afternoon, after a long legal meeting, she waited until everyone else left. Daniel, she said. I stopped at the door but didn't turn around. I'm leaving him. I nodded once. That's probably wise. I should have left a long time ago. Yes. She let out a broken laugh. You don't make this easy. I turned then. Emily, my job is not to make your regret comfortable. Tears filled her eyes. I know. For a moment, I saw the woman from the rain all those years ago. The broken umbrella. The bright laugh. The person I had loved before betrayal turned her into a stranger. I did love you, she said quietly. I believed her. That was the hardest part. People think betrayal means the love was fake. Sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes the love was real, but the person was weak, selfish, hungry for something they refused to name. Real love does not excuse real damage. I loved you too, I said. Her face crumpled. Then I added, but I love my life now more than I miss the one you destroyed. She wiped her cheeks and nodded. That was the last private conversation we ever had. 6 months later, Carter Events was dissolved. The warehouse sold for less than Michael had claimed it was worth, but enough to satisfy the most dangerous debts. Several creditors accepted reduced settlements. The lawsuits were contained. My parents kept their home, though they had to refinance under strict terms. Michael declared personal bankruptcy. Emily filed for divorce. My parents asked to meet me one more time. I almost said no, but Anna said, closure is not the same as reconciliation. So I went. We met at a quiet diner halfway between my city and theirs. No conference room, no lawyers, no Marcus. Just the 3 of us. My mother cried when she saw me. My father looked like a man who had finally run out of speeches. We sat in a booth near the window. For a while, Nobody spoke. Then my father said, "I failed you." I looked at him. He had never said anything like that to me before. "I thought protecting Michael was what a father does," he continued. "But I wasn't protecting him, I was enabling him. And I sacrificed you because you made it easier. You never asked for much, so I gave you less." My mother covered her mouth. I felt something sharp move behind my ribs. My father's voice broke. "I am sorry, son. Not Daniel, son." This time, I let the word exist. My mother reached across the table but stopped before touching my hand. "I told myself you would be okay because you were strong," she said. "But that was just an excuse not to see your pain." I looked out the window. Cars passed. People walked by carrying coffee. The world kept moving, indifferent to old family wounds. "I needed you," I said. My mother sobbed. "I know," she whispered. "I know that now." I turned back to them. "I don't hate you." Their faces lifted with cautious hope. "But I don't trust you either." The hope dimmed. "I can forgive what happened," I said slowly. "But forgiveness doesn't mean access. It doesn't mean holidays. It doesn't mean you get to meet my daughter and pretend you were always loving grandparents." My mother nodded through tears. My father looked down. "I have a family," I continued. "A wife who stood by me. A daughter who will never be taught that love means accepting betrayal quietly. That life is sacred to me. I won't bring old poison into it just because you finally regret drinking it." My father whispered. "Is there any way back?" I thought about that. 10 years ago, I would have wanted them to beg. I would have wanted them to suffer. I would have wanted them to understand every ounce of pain they caused. Now they did. And it didn't give me back what I lost. "There may be a road," I said. "But it's long. And I'm not walking it for you." We left without hugging. But as I got into my car, my mother called my name. "Daniel." I turned. She stood beside my father in the parking lot, small under the gray sky. "Are you happy?" she asked. I thought of Anna, Lily, pancakes on Sunday mornings, a house full of laughter, a life that no longer required me to shrink so someone else could feel big. "Yes," I said. "I am." She nodded, crying again. "Good," she said. "That's all I ever should have wanted." I drove home with the radio off. When I pulled into the driveway, Lily ran out the front door before I even shut off the engine. "Daddy." She crashed into me with the full force of a 6-year-old who believed the world was safe because I was in it. I lifted her and spun her around. Anna stood on the porch, smiling softly. "You okay?" she asked. I looked at my wife. My real wife. The woman who never asked me to be strong so she could avoid being kind. Then I looked at my daughter, who was now trying to tell me 3 stories at once. "I am," I said. And I meant it. Later that night, after Lily fell asleep, I sat alone on the back porch. My phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. "Heard the meeting happened. You all right?" I typed back, "Yes." Finally. Then I opened my contacts and looked at the numbers I had unblocked only for the restructuring. My mother, my father, Emily, Michael. One by one, I deleted them. Not out of anger. Out of peace. Some doors close with a slam. Others close quietly. After you realize there is nothing left inside worth returning to. 10 years earlier, my wife chose my brother over me. My family chose comfort over truth. And I chose survival because it was the only choice I had left. But survival was not the end of my story. It was the beginning. They came begging for my help when the life they built from my pain finally collapsed. I helped them enough to stop the bleeding. But I did not give them my life again. Because the greatest revenge was not watching them lose everything. It was realizing they no longer had the power to take anything from me. Not my peace, not my family, not my name. And not the man I became after they left me behind.